This is the May 3rd meeting of the Tonganoxie City Council. I'll call it to order here at 7 o'clock p.m. Mr. Porter, would you mind calling the roll for the vote, please?
Ms. McCutcheon.
Here.
Ms. Stevens.
Here.
Mr. Dale.
Here.
Mr. Donnelly.
Here.
Mr. Hempel.
Here.
Mayor Freeze.
Here.
All present, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Please stand and join us in the Pledge of Allegiance, if you would. Moving on to the approval of minutes. Any thoughts on those, friends?
Make a motion we approve as presented.
Thank you, sir.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. The next thing on the consent agenda was a review of the bill payments. Is there any discussion? Mr. Porter, what was the $38,000 expense to? I can't remember it now. Sorry.
Is it Blue Cross and Blue Shield?
Oh, that was Blue Cross and Blue Shield.
Yeah.
I know that. Okay. Any other discussion or questions?
I'll
take a
motion to approve.
Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Did anyone sign up for the open agenda, Mr. Porter?
No one contacted us, Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Moving on to old business, there is none listed on the agenda, so we'll move on to number 5, new business, presentation of request for funding support for the Leavenworth County Regional Transportation Study Initiative. Mr. Brakovich?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. Coming to the podium is Greg Cause, representing the Port Authority. In your agenda packets tonight, there's a memo from Mr. Cause kind of outlining what this involves, and he's got some details. But late last year, the county wanted to pursue an initiative for a regional transportation study, and part of that includes an RFP to get professionals on board to assist with that. And I think what Mr. Cause has this evening is the results of the efforts of a task force that was assembled to take a look at it, and some of the recommendations and requests that task force is coming forward with. So, Mr. Cause?
Hold on for a second, sir.
Okay, it's
There we go.
green now. Thank you for the introduction, Mayor, City Council members. My name's Greg Cause. I am the current chairman for the Leavenworth County Port Authority, and I am here today to talk to you a little bit about the Leavenworth County Regional Transportation Study. First of all, I will apologize for the cheesy PowerPoint template, but unfortunately they didn't give me a budget, so I had to go steal it off the internet. So it's courtesy of freepowerpoint.com. I couldn't get any cars in Leavenworth County, but those are cars in California, so I got what I paid for. I want to go through some of the history a little bit on the transportation studies real quick. I know you guys have been part of it, and I'm sure you're familiar with quite a bit of it. But the transportation issues for the northwest part of the Kansas City metropolitan area has been a challenge for a long time. We've seen a lot of development in the northeast area, the Liberty area, southeast, Lee Summit area, southwest, Olathe, but the northwest, I think, has lagged behind, and we haven't seen the development like we have in the rest of the Kansas City area. So there's been a lot of concern by a lot of people in Leavenworth County, and even within KDOT and within MARC, of trying to get some development going in the northwest part of Kansas City. There's been a lot of studies done, and I'm just going to walk through some of these studies real quick because I don't want to spend a bunch of time on them. But going back almost 20 years, we did the Call Connect Major Corridor Study, looked at I-70 from Topeka to Kansas City, included a 2440 extension from Perry to Tongi, 24 40 realignment, East Lawrence bypass, east-west capacity improvements, K7 upgrade. 2006, next slide, went to a K7 corridor management plan, and this was broke up into 3 different segments. Segment 1 was kind of the Olathe area. Segment 2 was more in the middle towards the Bonner Springs, and segment 3 would have been the north portion. There was a lot more interest and consideration given for segments 1 and 2 than there was for segments 3. But basically, they looked at 4-lane plus auxiliary lanes. They looked at interchanges at Parallel, Leavenworth, Donahue, Hollingsworth, Fairmont, and McIntyre Roads, overpass at Dempsey, and then intersection improvements once you got into the city of Lansing. Next slide. 2007 was the US 2440 Corridor Management Plan, and this looked at 2440 from Honey Creek Road to K7. They also did look at a north-south corridor road that would fall somewhere west of Baser and would go south to the Leavenworth County limits and eventually tie into Johnson County. Next slide. 2008 was the T-Link and KDOT consultation for Leavenworth County. Looked at K92, mainly from City of Leavenworth to KCI. Looked at a 73 bypass south of Lansing, west of Leavenworth. They also looked at realignment of K5 highway from K7 to 435 in Walcott. Again, 2440 from Perry to Tonganoxie was looked at. And as part of the K92 Leavenworth to KCI Airport, the Centennial Bridge across the Missouri River was looked at. 2013, 5-county study, I-70, 2440, a lot of the same things that we've looked at before. Additional studies were done. Getting to more recently, 2016, a study was dedicated to the Centennial Bridge coming out of the city of Leavenworth on 92 Highway to connect over into Missouri. It was originally proposed as a toll bridge, but there was a lot of resistance from the city of Leavenworth and from Fort Leavenworth on making that a toll bridge. So kind of the toll became a no-go on the study. However, the study did look at what would be needed to put a new bridge in. They looked at a new bridge north of the existing bridge. They also looked at capacity improvements on 4th Street and on Metropolitan. Part of this work also looked at putting a roundabout in on the Missouri side on 92 Highway and 45 Spur, kind of by the old Workingman's Friend, what they used to call Workingman's Friend. And that work, actually the notice to proceed for that project is today. So that construction is going to take place. MoDOT is putting that in. That work will be occurring this year with a scheduled completion in December of this year. And eventually the new bridge would tie into this roundabout. The Centennial Bridge, about a month ago, got moved from the illustrative list to what they call constrained portion. And basically it bumps it up from to where the preliminary engineering can begin. And KDOT reallocated some of the funding for the construction at K7 and I-70. Those improvements were broken into about 7 or 8 different projects. And so some of the later projects they've delayed, taken that money to put into the design for the Centennial Bridge. And the anticipation is once the design is done, then within hopefully the 2 to 5 year time period, construction would be started. If some of this infrastructure money comes down from Washington, D.C., that may accelerate that project, because obviously anything that's shovel ready and ready to go is probably going to get a priority versus something that has to be designed and go through all the study process. Some of you might remember a Patriot Highway project. This was proposed by John Bradford when he was working for the Maris Consulting Group. And it was going to be a new north-south intelligent highway that would run east of Linwood, west of Baser, come across the Kansas River, and then basically turn to the east, north of Baser and south of Lansing, go across the Missouri River, and then tie into Missouri. Again, probably somewhere around the 152 area, 435 area. This was proposed as a $4 billion project, billion with a B. Big project because it was supposed to be the intellectual highway. I don't know if any of you saw, I think it was last week or week before, Leavenworth, I believe, is doing a short stretch of what they call intellectual highway. And supposedly it's going to have the ability to charge electric cars as the cars run down. It'll have conduits to put in stuff for internet, for other communications. It was a pilot project, very, very expensive. And as you can see, this project is going to be very expensive, but it did include 2 bridges across major rivers. Unfortunately, the public was not real happy about this project, and with the high price tag, it kind of died at the vine. Most recently, you probably have heard about the Eastern Gateway project. And this was a project that was proposed by a couple of the county commissioners, and they commissioned a study with Trans Systems back in the spring of 2020 to do a conceptual study on this project. Their conceptual study showed different routes, basically starting at 4th and Eisenhower, the border of City of Leavenworth, City of Lansing, proceeding southeast, kind of by the old women's penitentiary, and then over into the bottoms, proceeding a little farther south, and then cutting across the Missouri River, tying in at 152 and 435. The price tag on that was estimated at about $300 million. The project was kind of put on the shelf because of the price tag again. A month later, however, the county was approached by John Smolin of Ballard and Spar about a possible public-private partnership to do this job. Ballard and Spar, their idea was to build the project and then it would be funded through the repayment of a toll system. And you would basically have to pay toll to go across it. What they proposed the county was, if you write us a check for $175,000, we will do a feasibility study to see what it will take to complete this project. The county had this on the agenda. At that meeting, myself and Harlan Russell with Leavenworth County Development Corporation spoke and asked if they would table that issue to get more public input and allow us an opportunity to weigh in on it. And so they did agree to do that. And they postponed it, tabled it for a month. 1st of December, they put it back on the agenda. We had written a letter to them saying, hey, you know, this Eastern Gateway thing, if it can go through, man, it's a home run, great deal, if the dollars work, but we think we need to be looking at a more regional plan for all of Leavenworth County and not just look at this project and say, this is where we want to put all of our money. I mean, how do we know that we want to put $300 million in an Eastern Gateway? Maybe we're better to put $300 million in a new interchange off of I-70 between Baser and Tonganoxie with an idea of a bypass that would serve Leavenworth, Lansing, Baser, and Tonganoxie, serve everybody. If we're going to spend that kind of money, there's a lot of different options. You know, maybe we're better to look at total improvements of K7, something like that. So the county said, well, okay, we want the Port Authority to lead a regional transportation plan and see if we can get some sort of a plan in place. And so I agreed that the Port Authority would do that since they'd asked. The next motion was they went ahead and made a motion to spend the $175,000 to do a feasibility study, of which they are still in the process of doing. They've not gotten any information back. They were supposed to have information back in about 60 to 90 days, but the people doing the study wanted additional traffic count information from Trans-Systems, so Trans-Systems had to do some more work before they could complete their feasibility study. So, since we had been giving the marching orders to look at a regional transportation study, January 5th, myself, Bill Knoll with Leavenworth County, a representative from Olson and Associates, who is the county's on-call engineering firm, met with Secretary Julie Lorenz, her deputy secretary, one of their chief engineers, and then we also met with representatives from MARC. And we said, hey, you know, Leavenworth's wanting to do this regional transportation study. If we're going to do this, one, we want to make sure it's something that KDOT is going to recognize and MARC's going to recognize and is going to use. We don't want to waste our money on something that you guys are going to throw your hands up and say, well, it's a piece of crap. So they kind of gave us some ideas, and they said, you know, this is something we've wanted Leavenworth County to do for a long time. And Secretary Lorenz was at a chamber meeting about 2 years ago. And at that chamber meeting, she said the same thing. You guys need to get all on the same page and tell us what you want. That we don't want to come into Leavenworth County and try to referee between the cities and the county. And she indicated that, you know, if we could get everybody on board, that KDOT would probably provide some funding for the study, with the idea that hopefully the study, when we get done, will have a list of what our priorities are for projects, and KDOT can go in there and start picking them off. So with that, we had several study sessions. We've drafted a request for proposals for engineering services, which I believe have been included in your packet. And for that RFP, one thing that I had requested was to have a subcommittee to review it, and also have this subcommittee to make the selection of the engineering firm. The reason I wanted to do that was because I was hoping I could get professionals within the cities that would make that choice and would evaluate it. Not that volunteers aren't good, but myself, I'm not an expert at selecting engineering consultants. George, his team, the other cities, their teams, they do it every day. They know what to look for, they know what to ask for. And since I was going to come and ask for money, I felt that you need to have the professional staff involved, since we're spending money too. So we did come up with a subcommittee, and it is made up of George for the city of Tonganoxie, Leslie for the city of Basel, Mike Spickemeyer for city of Lansing, Paul Kramer for city of Leavenworth, and Bill Knoll for Leavenworth County. I also serve on it, and the representative from Olson, but we are not voting members. We just participate in the selection process, but we will not vote on it. And just so that you know, Olson and Associates has already said that they will not submit any proposals for this, since they have provided input on the RFP, and they will be involved in the discussions, at least on the selection. So they have bowed out from providing any proposals. So the subcommittee, they have looked over the RFP, they provided input, and we do have a final RFP. Once we have that, then I was to go and make a presentation to all the cities and to the county, and that's what I'm doing right now. So the RFP, let's talk about it real quick. Again, I've mentioned the goal of it is to pull all the previous studies together. There's probably studies out there that I haven't mentioned that the consultant needs to find. And they need to look at all the studies. They need to look at your comp plans for all the cities, for the county. And let's try to pull everything together and hopefully gain an understanding of Leavenworth County, what has been done. It needs to be a combined effort with the cities and the county, KDOT and MARC. So hopefully we're going to get everybody on the same page. Leavenworth County will be the lead agency with the consultant engineer. So the contract will be written between Leavenworth County and whoever the consultant is. There will be a side agreement, that should be a very simple agreement, according to David Van Paris, between each of the cities and the county for their share of reimbursement. Estimated that it will be a 12-month study once a contract is issued. My guess right now is a contract probably will not be issued until at the earliest July or August. Could be later depending on funding issues. You see up there what the selection criteria is: project understanding, project approach, project management, project team, and relevant experience. Again, we're looking for somebody to give us a quality study, not necessarily the cheapest study, but we want something that can be used and is a useful tool in the future. And keep in mind, this is not something for construction in a 2 to 4 year time frame. This is looking at more in the 10 to 20 year time frame. So if we're going to look at a bypass, between Tonganoxie and Baser that will extend north, that obviously isn't going to be done overnight. That's something that's going to take many years to complete and going to have to be done in stages. And I've always been an advocate of an I-235. You say, I-235, what's that? Well, we have I-635, we have I-435. Well, the next loop out's I-235. Now, I personally think it should go between Baser and Tonganoxie, but that's Greg's opinion. That's what we hire the engineers for. The scope, develop goals, objectives, again, collect data, look at previous studies. We want to look at traffic volumes, crash history, infrastructure condition, maintenance, forecasted traffic patterns and volume. And then we want to develop a prioritized model to rank and identify the projects. We should also, the engineer should look kind of a high level of environmental clearances. Obviously, if you're going to build a bridge across the Missouri River, the environmental clearances are going to be a lot higher than if you tend to build something across a farm ground or something like that that doesn't have as many environmental issues, floodplains, things like that. So the consultant will present the draft findings to the Port Authority. They will also present them to each of the cities and to the county with the goal of hopefully developing a consensus among everybody of what the priorities should be. Once they've gone through and done that, then they will issue the final report for adoption and endorsement by the elected county and city officials. Hopefully this report then will be used for steering guidance for KDOT and for federal funding. And if anybody has ever dealt with MARC or with KDOT, if you don't have this study, it's tough to get money. And that was something that Vernon Fields with Baser had mentioned too, that he serves on MARC's Total Transportation Committee. And he's trying to get money up here, and they say, well, what's your plan? What do you guys want to do? Well, we don't really have one. We've got a lot of studies, but we don't really have a plan. So this is hopefully going to give us a plan and put us in a better position to get state and to get federal funding. The study is estimated to cost somewhere between $400,000 to $600,000. That's based off of what KDOT's telling us and what MARC is telling us. Until we actually get a consultant on board and we narrow down the scope and negotiate out a price, we don't really have a final number. We want to plan on funding for $450,000. You can see up there, this is a proposed funding stream. Basically, KDOT would provide 150, Leavenworth County 150, City of Leavenworth 90, Lansing 30, and Baser and Tonganoxie 15 each, for a total of 450. If the study comes in more than that, then we will probably try to go to KDOT and to Leavenworth County to pick up the difference. My main thing is that we want to get some buy-in from the cities that they're interested in this and that they want to participate and that they've got skin in the game. So that's kind of the money ask of why the money's there. I have been to City of Leavenworth and they have approved their portion very favorably. City of Basehor I was at, they've approved their portion very favorably. At Tonganoxie tonight, City of Lansing I will go to Thursday night, and then I'm planning on Leavenworth County a week from Wednesday. If I can get commitments from all of these, then we will go to KDOT and say, hey, we got everybody on board. This is what we're looking at, or we need participation. And hopefully we'll get the commitment from KDOT. So with that, that is kind of where I'm at. We have included the RFI. If you have any questions on it or on anything that I've talked about, I will try to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Cos. Thank you so much for your leadership. I enjoy listening to you, and thanks for working on this as well as projects on our behalf prior.
Thank you.
For that. And your comments on volunteers are right on. Are there any questions? I don't have any. Do you guys have any questions or any discussion for Mr. Cos?
I would like to make a comment. I would like to follow up with the mayor and thank Greg. If you look at the time spent, and I know the pay is really, really good as the chairman of the Port Authority, but the time Greg spends for the betterment of the county, this is just a drop in the bucket. It's just hours. So thank you, Greg, and I really mean that. Just a short comment. I'm going to go back farther than what Greg has on a sheet, and it's going to date me, but 2440 Highway was expanded because of a study. And that was back in the early 90s, and that was expanded to what it is today because of a piece of this. But I think what Greg is trying to get to, and I will do full disclosure that I obviously serve on the Port Authority Board, and we've debated this and discussed it at length, went to the county commission meetings in person and listened. So I've got an opportunity to be a little bit farther ahead than you, and I will clearly admit that. But overall, we've had all these little studies, but we've never had us all come together and say, what does this county need overall? There's bits and pieces, and they're all good. There's nothing wrong with them. But we need to sit down, I think, and push this into a very neat pile with all of us having a voice at the table and saying this is what we need countywide instead of piecemealing the thing together like we've been doing. And I think this is a great step. I probably will not see the fruits of it, but hopefully my kids will and my grandkids will, to where it improves what goes on in the county. And without this, we're just not at the table. And I think that's been a problem for some time. So I appreciate you doing it. It makes total sense to get together, slow down, get a plan which we all agree on, and that we can all get behind, and everybody's had a voice. So I appreciate it, Greg, and I think it's the right thing to do.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I work at a high school in Leavenworth County, and in addition to the infrastructure, which I suspect will be a result of the plan, and I'm on board, I agree that this is important, but also a transit system, and I hope that that will be a part of the discussion. One time I asked my students to figure out how, if you do not own a personal vehicle, would you get into Kansas City, Missouri, to be able to try out the new trolley system, the train. And they were really mystified. They couldn't figure it out. And so transit, public transportation needs to be a part of this comprehensive plan, and I hope that that will be part of it. Not just more roads and bridges, which I believe are important, but also how do people without cars get from where they are to where they need to be for work, to spend money from Kansas City and out of here too. So anyway, but I'm supportive of what you're doing, and I really appreciate it.
Okay. And I appreciate your comments. Those are very good comments. That is something that we have discussed a lot about. At this point, mass transit is not an item that will be looked at. There's been other studies that have looked at it, but this one is more of the roads and the bridges, which a lot of the mass transit will need unless you use rail or something like that. So I just want to be upfront and honest with you.
I appreciate it. Anyone else? Okay, thank you, Mr. Cos.
Okay.
Thanks for coming and talking.
Budget item, how will we budget an item like this? Obviously, we just can't put $50,000 involved. So
Yeah.
what's the plan, or what would be a plan?
Sure. I think what we could do is, provided we get direction from you, is probably come up with some options of where we could find those funds, see if that requires any sort of a budget amendment for the current year. Mr. Cause, remind me of the date that you want the funds available or at least committed.
And Mr. Porter asked me that question too. At this point, I don't have a date, and my hope is that the county would work with you. If you want to put this into 22 budget, then the county would work with you. Like I said, I can't imagine that a consultant would be on board until August at the earliest, more likely fall. So the funding to, to pay that consultant with a 12-month study, probably the majority of it's going to fall into 22 anyway. But I would hope that the county would be sensitive to that, and the county could float the city, if that's what you want to call it, until 22, if you so chose to need to do that, or work something out if this all goes through, there'll be some type of an agreement that's going to come back between Tonganoxie and Leavenworth County for the funding. And at that point, I'm sure that would direct when payment would be made.
I think that segues into a question I had in regard to the projected costs. You mentioned it's expected to be between 400 and 600. The memo says 450 to 650. The budget, so to speak, or the estimation is at 450. If that comes in at, say, 600, would you expect that the difference would be equitable between the partners involved, or I'm guessing KDOT hasn't committed to 150 either, correct?
That's correct.
So that cost, we're looking here at 15,000, but that could be far different after everything gets settled.
First of all, I wrote the memo, so the difference between 4 to 6 and 450 to 65 is called age 60. I'll leave it at that.
They're all estimates. They're all estimates.
What I am hoping, and I'm not going to say I wouldn't come back, but my hope is that if, let's say it did go 600,000, that's what we needed to get what we need. My hope is that the county and KDOT would step up to make up that difference. And that would not be my first choice to come back before each city and ask for another $5,000 from you or something like that. What I'm asking for is basically your buy-in to where you've got some skin in the project.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Cause or staff? If not, I would entertain a motion. Or do you need a motion? I didn't see one in the packet.
Mayor, I think a motion perhaps to direct staff to advance discussions with Leavenworth County staff about a potential agreement to commit $15,000 in funding as presented would be perfectly acceptable for this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Porter.
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Hempel. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Mr. Porter, will you call the roll for the vote, please?
Ms. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Dale,
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly,
Yes.
Mr. Hempel.
Yes.
All ayes, Mayor. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Again, Mr. Cos, thank you so much for your leadership, and thanks for coming tonight.
Thank you for your consideration. It's appreciated.
Safe trip back.
All right. Moving on to item B, consider approval of proposed budget for 2021 Tonganoxie Days community event. I believe this is Mr. Porter's.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to recognize a couple key volunteers in the group today. Here at the council meeting, we have Monica Gee, president of TBA. Tammy McCutcheon, remind me your treasurer of TBA. Councilmember Jennifer McCutcheon and Mayor Freeze have all participated heavily in discussions that lead to where we are tonight. In the agenda packets for this evening, we've added a agenda statement that illustrates a draft budget for the 2021 Tonganoxie Days event, scheduled to be held September 18th in conjunction with a movie in the park on September 17th, the night before Tonganoxie Days. The event did include a rough schedule, or a programming list, I guess, and a schedule of starting at 9 a.m. overall and concluding at 11 p.m. The 11 p.m. was my mistake. It's actually slated to end a little earlier at 9 p.m. Hopefully we're not still here at 11, disturbing everyone. There's a host of programming listed in the agenda packet and an estimate of draft cost associated with some particular portions. Those are subject to change as volunteers step up or sponsors willingly chose to cover one or more items. There may be changes in how the funding would be allocated, but that's a rough outline to help illustrate where the city's contribution is projected to come from. There's a pretty significant departure from past Tonganoxie Day event budgets in that we're projecting and proposing that the City Council tonight would authorize the approval of the estimated budget and the authorization to remit $7,500 to the Tonganoxie Business Association, which would allow that organization to procure the services and the goods for the event, submit the special event plan back to the city for consideration, and help manage things in a more efficient process. They can also do things that the city and city staff typically don't do, such as jury vendor applications. So if the window salesman and the real estate agent want to participate, but the community maybe desires craft vendors that produce an original product, that would allow a group to kind of slot through those and sort through those and have a better opportunity to put in high value vendors as opposed to the city really not being able to make that decision in most cases. So that's, excuse me, that is a general overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm sure Monica, Tammy, Jenny, and the mayor would also be excited to help address any questions you have.
Excited is an interesting word. Ms. Gee or Ms. McCutcheon, do you want to speak to the Tongi Days event?
Monica Gee, 17685 214th Street, Tonganoxie, Kansas. President of Tonganoxie Business Association. Over and over, we've been asked by community members to kind of bring back the traditional Tongi Days with vendors. So sometimes the vendors were low, like craft vendors. We didn't have enough to fill the area. So that's why we decided to do a flea market along with it. That's also an on trend, and everybody wants to go to flea markets. So another way to do it without expending money, entertaining our whole street. Craft vendors, as Mr. Porter mentioned, we'd like to jury them so we don't get 5 Cincy representatives and 10 candle salespeople. We just want to have more for us without being limited to one type of event. Kids games, we want to go away from inflatables. So we're going to do more hands-on games like you would find at a fair game, carnival games. Food trucks, we also kind of want to jury those a little bit so we don't get 10 people selling hamburgers and 18 people wanting to sell funnel cakes. And we want to keep the numbers low because food vendors are starting to want a minimum. So we want to be able to make sure we have enough participants to make their minimums and hopefully let them make money. Car cruise, we're working with VFW to also, instead of just their June, to potentially bring in another car event, and we'll incorporate it into a car show, car cruise. Live music, Councilwoman Stevens has offered to help us. We've been pricing bands, but most of them are booked. They've all been booked because of COVID. So we're working on that. Nice thing about this is the city doesn't have to hold or purchase the liquor. We have a local business, 1866, who will have their truck available for that. And then the street dance will coincide with the bands and the live music. So our goal is to have it all up and down 4th Street. We originally were shooting for down at Gallagher Park, but with not having the funds to get a big band, it's kind of hard to expend money for a stage and try to book some of these bands within a reasonable budget. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for Ms. Gee?
I mean, right now, we know for a band, you said? I'm sorry? Oh, anywhere from, right now, the least amount we've got for a band is 700. And they've been up to 4,000 to 6,000, which those are way out of our ballpark. So that's why we're thinking we need to scale down and just have it on 4th Street, have a small street dance, make it a community-centric event instead of we're going for a big music fest, if that makes sense.
I think in past years, the music budget was like 15 plus
15 to
$1,000.
20,000, but that's when the city was asking for sponsorships, and it wasn't the city necessarily, but the organizers. And
Yeah.
that is against what TBA does, so if we were to be asked to be in a partnership with this, we do not ask for sponsorship.
Yeah, no, and that also seemed like
A lot.
really expensive. I mean,
Right.
I've had a lot of great musicians come through my own business, and I've never, ever paid even close to $1,000.
And we have reached out to bands who were previously here, and some of them came in at $300 when they were previously here. Now they want $700 to $900. So they're asking these prices because they can, because COVID, nobody got to perform. So we have to keep that in mind.
Gasoline.
So,
I appreciate what you're doing. I know it's a lot of work, and Mayor, thanks for getting involved. It would be really great if we could have something, finally get this place opened up and have people out and enjoy
Right.
community again.
and our goal to move it to a different day in the fall, so everyone who watches understands too, is it's so hot in June that it's getting harder and harder to get people to want to come and stand in 100-degree weather when it's that hot. So moving it to September kind of gives us a little bit of break from weather potentially. And it's combining what was Sunflower Stroll with Tongi Days, but we want to honor the tradition and keep the name of Tongi Days.
Cool. Any other questions?
The last one on your budget impact, Andy, you have 2,500 for the mayor's, so we're gonna do all this at once.
We could adopt that budget, but if the council just wants to make authorization for 7,500, that would work fine. I put that in just for clarification about the usual breakout of the 10,000. But that'd be just fine if you want to advance both authorizations,
Thank
we
you, Ms.
can.
Gee. Okay, so I'd be looking for a motion, not unlike what Mr. Porter just said.
I would make the motion that we approve a total of $10,000 for community support events for 2021, including 7,500 for the Tonganoxie Days, 2,500 for the mayor's tree lighting. Let's see, I think that's all I need to put in.
Yeah, I think that's right. Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes unanimously. We meet again next Monday at 4, correct? Okay, we'll see you then, if not sooner. Moving on. We're on item C, consider approval of application for Section 404 nationwide permit from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Mr. Brakovich?
Yes, thanks, Mayor. So this is actually a follow-up request to something you considered and approved earlier this year in March. We asked for approval to move forward with a resubmittal to the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers for their wetlands regulated waters finding at the business park. So we've gone through that process, and while we don't have a final report, we've had enough communication with the Corps that it seems like they've changed their opinion on a portion of the park and have moved it into unregulated, but left other parts of the park regulated. And, sometimes it's as simple as the day they come to visit, it rained the day before, and there's rainwater holding in a low spot. We would still argue that's significantly different than headwaters of a stream, but we'll take the findings that come from that report. However, when we look at current marketing efforts in the park, specifically on lots 4 and 6, and a lot of what they deregulated is, you'll recall that in 2009, the city purchased about 240 acres. And we only really did the mass grading and development on the front 140 acres. And so what the 90 acres that you see to the right where it says Tonganoxie on that map, that's where they deregulated or unregulated a lot of the area, except for the really low spots. So when we're taking a look in the marketing efforts we've had, Lot 6 is the one where Dan's got the cursor now. So we look at that lot in particular and think, are there expansion opportunities into the unregulated areas that we haven't platted yet? And we think there are. But what gets in the way is Business Park Drive has quite a long extension. If you follow it from the property line that's to the east, there's a significant amount of road there and ends in a cul-de-sac that while the roadway and the planning that went into it made sense at the time, when you look at it now, it chews up a significant amount of that available property. And so what we're proposing then, or asking for consideration tonight, is to move forward with a nationwide permit. It's a 404 permit. This is what we did in 2017 when we needed to purchase some mitigation credits to put the road in closer to 222nd Street. So what the nationwide permit allows you to do is purchase a mitigation credit. So one mitigation credit equates to 1 acre. You make an application to the Corps. Small scale, about 1 acre or less, is what they would consider, and then you basically buy the mitigation credit to get clearance for your potential project or development for that area. So what we're proposing or asking for tonight is a lump sum of $5,000 to have GBA now submit the nationwide permit on our behalf. We think the area, and Dan, I think there was one slide that kind of had the blue circle showing what we're looking at. It's an area less than half an acre. And again, if you can envision being able to make a right-hand turn coming off of Business Park Drive, as opposed to going all the way at the end of the cul-de-sac, there's a little low spot, and that was the area that was holding water because of a rain event just prior to the Corps' revisiting of the site. So we anticipate that that's going to be somewhere in the ballpark of $30,000 or less to purchase that credit, but we think it'll make much more, the Lot 6 in particular, a much more usable site. And so I guess that could be a backside request. So again, the two things would be to go contract with GBA to submit this application on behalf of the city. The backside would be if we could authorize up to an amount of $30,000 should that get approved, so we can move kind of quickly on it. The deliverables overall, though, would be it takes about 2 weeks to get the submittals completed and ready, and then the Corps would take about 45 to 60 days to review. We're finding that they're on the shorter end of that time frame review. They actually got to our other requests pretty quickly. Again, part of it is I wish we had the foresight. We were feeling very confident with our report or the submittal that we were going to do the first time around to get the entire park deregulated. It did not work out in our favor. This particular area, though, is one of high interest for us. It still leaves a piece of the wetland that follows the property line. It goes along the property line of Lot 4 and eventually goes down into that large tract of ground that we reserved as a detention basin easement for stormwater for the entire park. That's not to say that sometime in the future there might not be an effort to go remove all of that, but for the time being and in the interest of continuing to market this site, that is the request before you tonight to consider that pursuing the nationwide permit. I'd be happy to answer any other questions you might have.
Thank you, Mr. Brockovich. Any questions for staff? All right, seeing none or seeing no questions, is there a motion?
For the GBA, yes. Okay.
I'll
Thank you,
second.
Thank you, Mr. Donnelly. Thank you, Ms. Stevens. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, council. Moving on to item D. I believe this one's George.
Yes, so this is the proposed 2021 street maintenance planned activities. So again, as we were going through the budget preparation roughly this time last year for 21, we asked for a certain level of funding especially the additional funding that comes from the infrastructure sales tax money and is geared towards the street maintenance program. It's a continuation of what the city council has approved for the last 4 years, trying to make an impact on all the road surfaces in town with an emphasis on those that were in the most dire need of attention based on a road conditions index map that was developed in 2017. So with that, Mr. Heskett's here tonight. He's taken a look at the budget that we've prepared for street maintenance this year, and he's got a multi-phased approach in terms of areas impacted and the type of street maintenance to be performed. And with that, I'd ask Mr. Heskett maybe to give you a few more details, and should you have any other questions, I'm sure between Mr. Porter and Mr. Heskett and myself, we'd be happy to answer those.
You've done a good job tonight. So yeah, on the base bid number 1, that is mostly just a mill and overlay. Not every street will get milled. Some portion, at least on those streets, will be though. And my hope is that those bids come in at a really good price, and we can move on to base bid number 2 with a slurry seal and hit some of the main roads, such as Main Street and Pleasant Street, and improve those streets. So on the map that Dan has up, you can see the streets that we're looking to mill and overlay. It's the more the center of town in the red, and West Washington Street by the Catholic Church and Baptist Church. So hitting those red ones, we'll leave 2 streets still in the red. And if possible, we'll knock out the one by the VFW park if there's money left over. But I'm not real hopeful on that. But.
Is this kind of your priority? I mean, if we look at this list, it's kind of your priority of how you go to your
Yes. Yeah, the base bid number 1 is I'm very confident we have the money to do those. And then if the bids come in really good, we can move on to the base bid number 2. But tonight I'm just asking for permission to go to bid on these and see where they come in at.
I was wondering if this was sequential, so like that answered my question. Thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions or discussion?
Nope, this looks great. Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to authorize advertisement of the proposed 2021 street maintenance projects as presented.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon. Let's try a voice vote on this. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Heskett. Great work, as always. Moving on to item E, consider approval of 2021-22 plan year employee benefits renewals. Dan, Mr. Porter?
Thank you, Mayor. So this item, excited to bring before you for consideration tonight the renewal of current plan offerings for the upcoming plan year 2021 through 2022 for city employees and library employees to participate in health, dental, and vision insurance plans. We held open enrollment each year at the end of May. So unfortunately, the results of our compensation analysis and benefits survey that we really hope to present to the City Council on May 17th at our next meeting will not be ready in time for when we need to achieve these plan renewal executions. So that's why this is brought forward prior to that discussion. The City Council has typically evaluated and budgeted for the city to contribute a percentage of one of the 4 healthcare plan offerings to the city. The way to consider them are options A, B, C, and D, and the city's contributed a percentage rate of option C for all plans A through C, and then option D is a high deductible plan style, and there's a separate percentage rate for participants of that. City employees are free to make any change at open enrollment, so if they're currently in Plan A and their renewal comes in too expensive, they're able to elect to move down to Plan B, C, or D at that time, or move up if they choose to do that. One thing that's unique about health insurance too that makes it hard for us to project accurately every year what the rates will be is city employees are currently able to be offered a unique premium based on their age and the age of their dependents. Each year, that's what factors into these premiums. So it's different than larger employers such as any employer over 50 employees who would offer maybe a level funded plan option where all employees with plan type A pay X dollars a month. It's a little bit different in our case with our benefits package. We have had really good feedback from city employees about our Blue Cross and Blue Shield health insurance plan, and that's, as the most expensive benefit, probably the one we focus on the most and make sure that they're experiencing good customer service, good levels of benefit coverage, and aren't reporting any issues. And we're excited to state that they are not reporting any negative feedback at this time about that plan. There's a few benefit plan changes illustrated in the agenda statement, but I'd like to focus first on the financial impact, which is at the top of the second page of the agenda statement. So the city has experienced rate changes the last 3 years for health insurance that weren't unlike the greater market. 3 years ago, it was 11.5% increase in cost to the city, 2% increase 2 years ago, and 6.3% increase last year. This year, the overall net change, or gross changes would be the right term, for all city employees on the plan. And again, they've each aged a year, so some of that increase is due to their respective age increase. The overall net increase is about $3,000, or I'm sorry, 3% across all employees and all plans. When we look, though, at current plan selections for all benefited city employees, because of changes we saw this year in Plan C, which, as we've just talked about, determines the city's contribution level, Plan C became much cheaper. And so the city could actually, if everyone kept plan selections exactly as they are in the open enrollment, the city would see a decrease of about 10% in annual premium costs, which is unprecedented, as you see in the rate history. But I think it also represents a check on 3 years of Plan C getting more expensive, and thus the city contributing a greater amount of health insurance premiums. And so this is sort of a correction back to probably a level we were at a couple years ago when you factor in those 3 years of rate increases. So all in all, like I said, there are about 3% overall growth in premiums, but that's currently projected to bear more on the employees in this case than on the city. When we look at our compensation analysis and benefits survey, the council can consider whether adjustments are warranted one way or the other. But that isn't what's up for discussion tonight. Discussion tonight's focused on the benefit plan offering. Are there any questions about that aspect first?
Any questions, council?
It's very complicated, so I apologize if it wasn't extremely clear.
You've made it very simple to understand. Thank
Yeah.
you very
Okay.
much.
Dental insurance is the second item, and the city contributes 90% of employee-only plan premiums and 80% of family plan premiums. The agenda statement included a rate history dating back to 2015. Again, Delta Dental has a good reputation, and we haven't had negative feedback from city employees. 2021 plan year will not experience a rate increase, and last year we also had a rate decrease for both types of plans. So that's a great outcome as well for the city. We also had a monthly premium rebate earlier this year, which was pretty unprecedented, but it was due to the shutdown during COVID, and was a welcome adjustment being made for the obviously lack of available services for over a month really during 2020. Vision care is an employee benefit that's paid entirely by employees. We have a lot lower participation in that compared to dental and health, but we also have a track record of fairly low or no rate changes with VSP Vision Care, which is the provider. 2021 includes a 3% rate increase for employees who choose to participate in either employee only, employee plus one family member, or employee plus multiple family member plans. So overall, as we look at the net budget impact to the city, finishing out 2021 and the first half of 2022, the change in health insurance premiums really is the biggest driver, and that's obviously a very positive outcome. When we look at next year's plan year, we won't project 10% decreases every year, so rest assured we'll stay conservative with that as we look forward, but it's a good outcome and we're excited to have received it. Happy to answer any questions you might have, though.
Again, great work, Mr. Porter. Very easy to understand. Thank you. Any questions, council, for Mr. Porter? Seeing or hearing none, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize the execution of an agreement with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas for employee health insurance coverage, an agreement with Delta Dental of Kansas for employee dental insurance coverage, and an agreement with VSP Vision Care for employee vision insurance coverage for plan year 2021 and 2022.
Well done, Jake. Is there a second? You leave me hanging? Is there a
I'll
second?
second.
Thank you, Ms. Stevens. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you very much. Moving on to item F, consider approval of proposal for Encode 10 court management.
Thank you, Mayor. This item is one we're really excited to bring forward to you tonight. It's the culmination of many years of planning since the city adopted financial management and utility billing software through Tyler Technologies, a product called Encode 10. It's a great enterprise resource planning platform, which in sort of layman speak is a software tool that's intended to run all your lines of business or services and provide software support and management of data for all of those in a fully integrated sense and in an efficient manner versus having scattered assortment of programs that offer those services that maybe don't talk to each other or allow processes to work seamlessly. Encode 10 has been a good product since the city invested in 2016 in those first two products. We are, though, still without Encode 10 in some major areas of service, including court management, case management, and building permits and business licensing. Those items were not taken forward back in 2016 because of funding limitations at the time. The product is a quality product, but it is not cheap. And we're excited that this item was included in the 2021 adopted budget in the amount of $50,000. When we received our quote, We don't have a lot of options because it's a sole source product. It's proprietary, and the whole point of an ERP is that one service provider can offer it, and you buy everything from that provider. When they looked at their total cost quote for court management and for what they call community development, licensing permits and codes, the total cost was $53,769. So we had about just under $4,000 delta from budget. What was exciting, though, is when we tallied the costs that we would normally pay in the fall of each year for the upcoming year's software support, that totaled approximately $7,300. So we more than offset with some savings that won't need to be purchased if we move forward with these items tonight, and we'll have a net change in cost to the city of under $50,000 as budgeted. So we won't replace every piece of software. We do need to keep read-only access to help retrieve data for open records requests or maintain court records, but we don't need to have as active of licensing and interaction in those systems. Just a couple quick examples of the efficiencies we're going to see in this. Our court clerk currently, when she takes a payment, any miscellaneous court fine, basically enters in triplicate in a spreadsheet in the court management software and in Encode financials, each of the receipts that she collects. And unfortunately, that's necessary to balance at the end of the month and ensure there weren't errors. But with this new product, she would be entering it just like we enter utility bills one time, and it would flow between all the various accounting systems. So it's going to create a lot of efficiencies and offer us a way to improve the online payment experience for court and building permit especially. A lot of those payments are done over the phone or in person, and with this software, they'll be able to pay it online as easily as everyone can currently pay their utility bill. So that's a big improvement that we're looking forward to offering for our customers in those services. But happy to answer any particular questions the council might have.
Any questions for Mr. Porter?
Yeah, I do.
Go ahead.
Three pieces, really.
Uh-huh.
We own the data. We own our own data. Where's the data housed? What is the deconversion fee should we choose to change?
So our data is you're right, it's owned by us. It is hosted through Tyler Technologies on off-site servers. So they maintain the server upkeep and redundancy and all of that. Our termination period is usually in each of the software as a service agreements a 1-year period, but we do have the ability to do exports of our data. The question is, would it fit the next system? In a lot of cases, that's difficult, and as you'll see in the quotes tonight, some of our costs, our most expensive costs on the one-time side, are converting the old systems from court management in particular. We can't dump the cases we have in the chute right now. They all have to be, in some cases, manually converted. So that is a cost. Uh-huh. I don't believe there's a spelled out fee, but I could verify that and follow up. Okay. Sure. We'll follow up.
This will work with any website design we're doing, I assume.
It will. So the online payment aspect, like we use for utility billing now, this will just be a new tab on that municipal online payment site. So the city's website will simply direct to this third-party site where the payments are managed. So that's the nice thing as well, is the city won't need to maintain and keep security updates for a credit card online payment site through our own website, just simply a link and direct people there.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Porter. Any other questions or discussion?
This seems like it'll increase the level of functionality internally and externally. I've worked at places before where, you know, you have to learn like 6 different systems just to get through your day. And
Yep.
it sounds like that's what you all are juggling right now. So good for you for doing this.
We're appreciative the city council prioritized it in the budget. It's very exciting for City Hall.
If there's no more questions or discussion, I'd entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to authorize the acceptance of quote 2020-12477-2 for the Encode 10 Court Management Implementation and Support, and quote 2021-125-373 for the Encode 10 Community Development Implementation and Support.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Ms. McCutcheon. Mr. Porter, will you call the roll for the vote, please?
Ms. McCutcheon,
Yes.
Ms. Stevens,
Yes.
Mr. Dale,
Yes.
Mr. Donnelly,
Yes.
Mr. Hempel.
Yes.
All ayes, Mayor. Motion passes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Porter. Moving on to our agendas. City Manager's up first.
Yep, thanks, Mayor. So just one item tonight under City Manager agenda, and that's review of the 2021 budget initiatives. So in your packets, you should see a two-page document, and what this is intended to do is kind of remind us all of the progress that's being made. And so the budget initiatives themselves are broken down by fund or proceed type, and this represents what was approved last year as we developed the budget. And again, it's just kind of a measuring stick of what's been done. If there's an X in the box, it indicates it's been completed. So I'll just touch on a few of these really quick. Under the sales tax proceeds, we talked tonight about the funding that comes from the infrastructure sales tax and the special highway funding for street maintenance. So that box will soon be checked. We talked earlier during our CMIP discussion about the Church Street Bridge. We already used funds on PD improvements to the roof and the siding. Under general fund, there was a 3% merit pool for city employees. We've got $15,000 budgeted for the website redesign. We're working on that RFP now. We are nearly complete with the $10,000 that was budgeted for the comp study and benefits survey. And then going through, we just got done talking about the municipal court software upgrade and the building inspection or permitting process as well. You see a couple of the agencies that had requested funding that had already been completed with LCDC and Tonganoxie Arts Council. And then tonight you took care of the $10,000 funding for community events. Moving into the utility funds, we've completed purchases of a mini excavator and 2 utility vehicles in Public Works. We did the study for stormwater along Church Street, so we've done that analysis, and now we're moving in. Kent's working with BG staff on the actual construction documents, and we hope to get started with some of that work as early as this summer. On the public safety capital funds, you authorized the improvements to the police firing range. I believe that was either at the last meeting or the meeting before that. And we still have a little bit of funds sitting there for some of the grant matching that we expect to complete as those grants come due this year. The last piece of it then is just simply a reminder of the budget development timeline we're on. And so we did the spring retreat earlier this year. Tonight we hit the CMIP pretty hard. And again, I know I speak for Dan and myself and the rest of the staff. We appreciate the level of attention you gave that tonight. And it was a pretty thorough conversation, lots of projects on the horizon, and hopefully this time next year we're going through this same kind of a checkoff list for the 2022 initiatives. We prepared this mainly for our discussion points. We can make this a public document if you think it would be of interest to the public. Again, a lot of folks do follow us as we develop our budgets and see what those initiatives are. But for some folks, they don't follow it that way, or they have a random conversation with someone. So we're open to those suggestions as well. If we want to make this available on a regular basis or as a quarterly update on the website, or again, just kind of what your thoughts might be on that, because I think it's good information to show folks that there's activity occurring, and it's occurring across a pretty broad range of areas within the city, and they just simply may not be aware of it, so. And you don't have to give us that direction tonight. It's just, you know, as we do these updates, and as we're working on next year's budget, it's probably, timing-wise, it might not be a bad time to do that. Go ahead.
Did you have something else?
I was just gonna say I'd be happy to answer any questions, so I think we were on the same track there.
Well, seeing all these boxes checked off, apparently we didn't give you enough to do. Great job. This is a great job, great progress, and this is a great thing that we're able to show the public where their money's going. I really appreciate all your diligence on this. Thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions or for the city manager? Thank you, Mr. Brakovich.
Yep.
Moving on to city attorney agenda.
Mayor, I don't have any items.
Thank you. Moving on to Mayor Pro Tem agenda. Mr. Hempel?
I have two items. One of them concerns the trailer park south of Tongi. George, you can step in if I don't get it correct. It's, current zoning is for a trailer park, but under the comp plan, it can also be an RV park. And the debate was at the commission meeting, if they do want to take it and rezone it to an RV park, can they still have the trailers there? And that's yet to be determined at this time. And also, we're reviewing our annual update of the current comp plan that we did. We'll probably make a couple adjustments in it somewhere down the line also.
I think that's enough.
I would just add to Mr. Hempel's comments on the, I believe it's the Paradise Trailer Court. So my understanding in just following the discussion from the county attorney to the Board of County Commissioners is that the owner had pursued a special use permit for an RV park. So it's, the attorney's position on it is it's not an either or, it's one or, well, like I said, it's one or the other. So trailer homes are not compatible use with a special use for an RV park. And so some of the discussion has been, one of the county commissioners was concerned about if they decide to enact their special use permit and go to an RV park, there's going to be a significant amount of residents that are displaced immediately, and asked for the county to intervene. Again, the county attorney said that's not really their call. Those are private contracts on private property between the owner and the leasee. So my understanding is the last conversation, again, just by watching the county commission meeting, it's a large tract of ground, and there's at least half of it looks like it's not being used. And so I think they may explore trying to split the property into two parcels and leave the trailer park on one piece and push the RV on the other side of it. So that's the additional level of detail I'd have on that.
Thank you, George.
Anything more, Mr. Hempel?
No, sir.
All right. City council agenda. Anyone have anything?
I only have one thing.
All right, go ahead, Ms. McCussion.
I just wanted to bring up the planting of the flowers downtown on Sunday that the TBA did. Laura Lee and I assisted with that. It took us about 45 minutes to get everything in and planted. There was a pretty good group that showed up to help us with that, so we were able to get everything in and beautify downtown a little bit for the spring.
I want to say thank you to George for the weekly updates. It occurred to me how much I appreciate those. Just kind of getting an update on what the departments are doing. And thanks for the effort you put into those. Also, I will not be at our next meeting because I have a work event. My big internship showcase is going to be on the 17th. So I won't be able to be here. But duty calls for my day job every once in a while at night. And so it's a regrettable conflict, but I'll be proving my worth for my paycheck.
Anyone else?
I don't know if anybody's noticed, but, and I don't know the full details, but I believe that a lacrosse club out of Lawrence has been utilizing the fields at Chieftain Park on the weekends. So I'd encourage everyone that's kind of a sport that's kind of new to the area and go catch a lacrosse game at Chieftain Park on, I think, Saturdays is what I saw.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else? And Ms. McCutcheon, I pawned off my one thing from my agenda on you. Thank you so much for all your effort on making downtown look great. With
extend that to highway locations if they chose, so
yeah,
just let you know that.
good. With that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion. We'll both do it.
All right.
And
motion
second
from
it.
us, and a second from Mr. Hempel. All in favor, say aye.
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 Thank you all. Thank you for coming.